like to call the Thursday, September 23rd Board of Education meeting to order. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Yep.
Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Jen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Comments from the public. Are there any comments from the public? Okay. Let me give my standard speech, if you don't mind, which is certainly we welcome comments from the public. Each comment's limited to 2 minutes, and you may find it frustrating, but the board does not directly respond. We'll follow up if necessary, but we don't respond. So come on up and introduce yourself with your name. Thank you.
Can I take this off, or do I speak with it on?
I think you speak with it on.
Oh, sometimes it goes down. Okay. We came here for the exceptional school district. I have never felt an overwhelming...
Excuse me, I just want to interrupt one little time. Could you just introduce
Oh, yeah,
yourself
my
with your name?
Kristen Jacobson, 11 Bayberry Lane.
Thank you.
We came here for the exceptional school district. I have never felt an overwhelming need to send a concern to the Board of Ed about anything, but we now feel compelled to do so. The two most important groups teaching education are parents and educators. There needs to be transparency and accountability from the Board of Ed and teachers to parents about new and modified curriculum before they are presented to our children. Biased, leading, opinionated teaching is inappropriate and wrong. It is possible to be a great teacher while eliminating your personal opinions on politics, religion, and sensitive health choices in the classroom. In 7th grade, our son experienced very uncomfortable classes, which were prefaced by a statement from the teacher. If you feel uncomfortable, you can look away or get a drink. Our son is a polite and respectful 13-year-old who cares deeply about his grades. He did not think he would be allowed to leave during the presentation and worried that his grades hinged on him staying. There were a few Zoom meetings with a guest speaker who introduced very sensitive topics. Our son was given an assignment on Schoology about gender identity and was asked to complete it. He was told, "Your gender identity is what you want it to be, not what you are." This is not age-appropriate material. Gender identity and sexual orientation are personal and private matters and should not be taught as an academic topic in middle school. He was also given a survey in another class to determine which political party he aligned with. The questions were ridiculously biased. They didn't accurately represent the policies for which each political party stands. For example, a survey question was, what do you identify with more? 1, treating people equally, or 2, some people are better because of their race. We teach our children to be kind to all of humanity. However, this survey made Republicans sound like a cult of racist, sexist, condescending bigots. What child would want to be a part of that classification? Underage minors do not have a political party. There is a reason why our children in middle school do not vote, drink, drive, vote, or serve in the military. Please teach them facts, not opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
My name is Bianca Merkley. I live at 28 Old Highway, and I'm a mom to 2 kindergartners at Miller Driscoll. My husband grew up in Wilton. He went to Miller Driscoll as well when he was our daughter's age, and actually graduated from Wilton High. We've been excited to send our children to this school district, and this has been a great impact in our reasonings for choosing to live here. However, I'm concerned about the recent announcement that visitors who are not fully vaccinated against COVID-19 will not be allowed into the school building. This is discriminatory. This is not based in science, but in fear, and this new implementation will not protect anyone. It will only cause harm. To treat anyone as though they are less than human is wrong, especially when these are parents and caregivers, people who deeply love and care for their children. There are many reasons to choose to not get vaccinated to this COVID-19 vaccine, and they are valid and personal reasons. Of the few that I know who have made this choice, it has not been taken lightly. Many pros and cons have been weighed, and it's a difficult decision, one that is personal to one's own personal health and beliefs. Also, as I'm sure you all know, the vaccinated can still get the virus and even spread it. I know people personally who've experienced this. And if everyone in the building is wearing masks and supposedly those are protecting people from spreading the virus, then why would this recent change need to be implemented? I'm seriously considering pulling my daughters out of kindergarten. I never thought I would do that. But I feel it's wrong, and I'm going to find somewhere else for them to go to school if this continues in this direction. I implore you, please make decisions for the entire school district that are based in science and not fear. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So-
Thanks, Jen. Glenn, you gonna second it?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, I just have a very short report. I just want to congratulate and thank Dr. Smith and the leadership team, our world-class faculty and staff, our motivated kids, and our supportive families. We're off to a good start. We still have mitigation strategies, yes, but we also have full-time in-person learning. We've launched our accelerated learning model, and we've become energized around portrait of a graduate. So thanks, everyone, to such a good first 4.5 weeks?
4.5.
4.5 weeks. All right. Dr. Smith, your report.
Great, thank you. I have a number of updates this evening. First, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that this week marks the onset of one-year anniversaries of the tragic loss of several much-beloved community members. Our former plant manager, Cesar Jimenez, student George Duraco, and next week will mark the one-year anniversary of the loss of student Jacques Lucas. Our high school has implemented support plans for those most impacted, and we keep close in our hearts the families of those three community members. This past Tuesday, we hosted an hour-long webinar with Dr. Andrew Gerber from Silver Hill Hospital, who spoke about resiliency in both adults and children. He spent a fair amount of time talking about the importance of simply acknowledging and naming the stressors we experience as a beginning step in fostering resiliency. He also named the importance of adhering to good habits around sleep and diet and exercise, as well as the critical importance of staying connected with friends and family. I found the information shared by Dr. Gerber to be very helpful, and would invite all of our interested community members to access that webinar. You can find it on our website under the student support page. There's a link for resources for responding to grief and loss. On a more upbeat note, we offer congratulations to the 6 high school seniors who were named National Merit semifinalists. Avery Baumel, Catherine Campbell, Gavin Fusco, Edwin Gregory, Ria Raghavan, and Ria Ranawala. So congratulations to those 6 students. Also, just as an FYI, niche.com released their 2022 rankings, and Wilton Public Schools was ranked number 6 here in Connecticut, and the high school was ranked number 5. We received some initial feedback from the state on our ARP ESSER grant. Grant reviewers first requested that we craft a SMART goal for our priority 3, which was addressing social and emotional and mental health of students and staff. So part of that process was to provide SMART goals. So we've gone and done that already. And then the reviewer from the state noted 2 things. First was the very proactive interaction with Marianne Salvato, who is our business office manager and manages one of the grants. She wrote to Marianne and said, you know, Marianne and Wilton kind of were out in front of the grant applications, and she was really grateful for just how thorough our preparation was. And then the second was a commendation for our efforts at community engagement. So that was really welcome news. And then just a quick note, too, I wanted to acknowledge one of our Miller Driscoll teachers, Jacqueline Brunetto, who has been engaged in a children's book and teddy bear collection in support of Wilton's Circle of Care, which is a nonprofit that provides support to families dealing with childhood cancer. So we wanted to give her a tip of the cap. And then just a couple of other very brief updates. We are searching for an epidemiologist here in the state to do some consulting with, and we have not had any luck yet. So we continue to conduct outreach and shake some trees, and I will update the board if we can identify somebody. We'd also posed some questions to the state about the test and stay program that Massachusetts is running. I think it's running in a couple of other states, and we haven't gotten any positive feedback yet from them.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
It would be unusual, but just because you mentioned test to stay, I was on a CAVE call today and brought the question up to them. And so hopefully it will be addressed in the next Tuesday webinar call with DPH and the State Department. And I also, just because I want to cut down on the need to quarantine for days if possible, if we can do it right, I'd like to write perhaps a letter to DPH saying, could you research this and provide us some guidance on it? So I may do that and just send you a draft. So it's not we're going to do anything. It's just I'd love DPH to perhaps not wait for the CDC, because there are some other states who have embarked on it. So maybe they can talk to those DPHs. So anyway, sorry to
Okay.
interrupt.
Is there-
Didn't mean to.
Is there any reason we can't do our own thing? Are we liable for any reason to what the guidelines are?
So liable, I think probably not. However, it's been our practice from the onset of COVID that we adhere to guidance from the State Department of Education, State Department of Public Health. So, at this point in time, personally, I would be uncomfortable veering away from the guidance, particularly from the Department of Public Health, because we've been, I think, well served so far. So that would be my hesitation.
Okay.
So let's see if
Maybe you'll
what
have
they,
some luck.
yeah, let's see what their response is, okay?
Maybe they should act with some urgency about exploring.
Yeah, that's all I want. It's just like, give us an answer, look into it faster than
Yeah.
you might otherwise.
We've been pretty lucky so far, but I'd hate to see it turn a different direction.
Yeah.
and us
Exactly.
Have our hands tied.
Yeah.
And not be able to do anything.
All right, well, let's try this first step, so.
All right.
Yeah, and then just the last update I have for this report is just a note about buses. So we have been working with the Wilton Police Department. They've been on campus. I'm in touch with the principals. We continue to monitor traffic through campus. I'm told we're making, incremental improvements, but, we're still a fair number of minutes off our, typical run times from 2019. So, we're continuing to look at it, but, we're not making at this point any kind of significant headway in really, either reducing traffic through campus or speeding up the buses moving, from one school to another. So I'll continue to update you, and, hopefully we can, come up with a better solution. But I think that, the key issue for us is there's just a lot of volume on campus in a, condensed period of time. But there's, I think the bright side is, we've got a fair number of good, smart people working on it and looking at the problem from a number of different directions. That's it for the update.
Okay. Committee reports. Teaching and learning, did you guys meet?
We did. All right, we talked about a bunch of things, so I'll try to talk quickly. Maria joined us, and we had some personnel conversations about substitutes. Currently, there is we're looking for a long-term sub in high school biology, and those parents have already been notified. There is also a substitute in PE health in high school that I'm sure eventually we will notify our families. We talked about maybe having a rule of thumb of 1 week if we're going to have somebody other than the expected teacher being there, that they will be notified by building principals or somebody in administration. We talked about equity and inclusion. I have a feeling that will be a permanent part of our discussions. There's been some conversations about what our kids are being taught in class, and whether or not that is what we would like for them to be taught, and notifying parents prior to some of those issues coming about. We also talked about curriculum, and parents can go online and look to see what the curriculum is in that class and possibly what the books are that they're reading. And if they have additional questions, they can reach out to the teachers. They can reach out to Assistant Superintendent Smith. They can also reach out to us and share their concerns. We're happy to hear them. And we will direct them to the right place, but we're more than happy to listen to what the concerns are. We also talked about, there were some concerns about a pronoun question that went out to our students in the first couple days of class. I think after all of us talking, it was really truly just a get to know me from the teachers, and it was via emails to our students in many of their classes, and it was just a way for the children who wanted to share how they identified with to share that with the teachers. We also talked about, prior to doing that in the future, that maybe we can give our kids a heads up so that they know what they're looking at, but also maybe reaching out to parents, because I know a number of the kids were a little taken aback and maybe a little uncomfortable with some of the questions because they weren't expecting it. We had Kin Zemo join us. She helped us with some of those questions. We also talked about the bullying process, and again, we discussed what that process is, what happens if our system fails, and how do we kind of rectify that situation, and making sure that in the future, I mean, mistakes happen, but around those areas, they probably shouldn't happen, and making sure that we are a little maybe tighter with our plans, for lack of a better word. We also talked about Middlebrook, the schedule that's possibly changing. Changes wouldn't go into effect until next year. The committee, I think, met this week to start. They are hoping to have some sort of decision to us, maybe by Thanksgiving. I asked maybe by budget time, so that if there are any changes that would have any implications in budget, that we would have something to look at. And there was also a question that we brought up about where was professional learning coming from for phonemic awareness and phonics training. And Andrea helped out with that, it's coming from some from Teachers College, some from the Hegarty, and then we also have our speech pathologist in the building working with the teachers, because it's really their scope of practice and they're the right person to be having teachers reached out to. And I think that is it.
Okay, a lot to cover.
Yes.
Or a lot covered. Thank you.
Yep.
And policy.
Yeah, so we met on September 14th, and we discussed policy 5141.3, which is health assessments and immunizations and related regulations, and noted that changes are necessary to bring the policy and regulations into legal compliance with Public Act number 216, which revised the religious exemption to the immunization requirements for school attendance, and also with two other public acts regarding vision screening implementation and reporting requirements for children with asthma diagnosis. We also had an initial discussion on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We discussed how policy should work in support of the district's mission and recently adopted Portrait of a Graduate, and build upon the ideas and understandings discussed at the recent board workshop. We discussed creating and sustaining learning environments that embrace respect and dignity for all, and where students feel valued, respected, and safe to learn and grow. We reflected on the importance of the work and to need to ensure that it is done with care. We agreed we should concurrently review the district's policy and regulations on non-discrimination and bullying and intervention, including the Safe Climate Plan. And we will continue to work in subsequent policy committee meetings and provide updates accordingly.
Okay. A lot of work there, too. Thank you.
Okay.
And business ops.
Business ops. At our last meeting, as I discussed before, our primary topic of discussion was creating an accounting change or accounting shift to handle our major capital improvement projects. So from that meeting that we had, we then met with the Board of Finance this past Tuesday, a week ago, and had a really great discussion with them. I think it's safe to say that they're all relatively in support of making the change and adopting the plan. There's still some discussion they have to have, but I think it was positively received by them, and there's certainly the rationale for doing it makes all the sense in the world. So hopefully, as we move forward into this next budget session, we'll be able to segregate our major capital projects out and deal with those as a separate line item under the towns and the Board of Selectmen's operating capital budget, which will give us some assurance that we will be able to complete these projects. So
Right.
it was a positive meeting.
Yeah, it was. There's some follow-up work, but that'll
Yeah.
hopefully happen in the next,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Anne's away,
Okay.
so we're going
Yeah.
to try to get it on the books for next week or at the latest the week after.
okay, great. Speaking of finances, you want to postpone that?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief overview,
Oh,
so
okay,
I'm prepared to
sure.
do that. So, as I mentioned just a second ago, Anne is taking a much-deserved vacation.
Oh, absolutely.
So, as you know, she does double duty and works endlessly on behalf of the town and us. So, just briefly, and when we meet again in the first October meeting, Anne will be present and she'll provide a comprehensive review of the end-of-year spending for fiscal '21, current year spending, as well as an update on our various grants. But just to preview that for you, we ended last fiscal year with a surplus of a whopping $342. So we spent our money. For this year, we are currently on track. We'll have a clearer picture of any variances once we hit October, because then we'll have a full month of our 10-month employee payroll. So that'll be an important update on the 7th. Our ARP and ESSER grants have been filed. The ESSER 2 grant, as you may recall, that's the grant that's funding the Cider Mill math interventionist as well as the part-time high school social worker. That grant has been approved, and those funds are currently being expended. We are anticipating approval very shortly of the ARP grant, and as I noted earlier, we did receive some positive feedback about our application. Beyond that, we also received an additional appropriation of $184,373 to address special education COVID-related issues. So that came through this ARP IDEA fund that was established. And so Marianne and Andrea's team are working together to figure out how best to plan and expend those funds. And then we also received another $20,000 grant from the state to address special education services. And Andrea has dedicated those funds to services that were provided this summer, some related services. And then you can just know that when Anne's here, she will give you lots and lots more details.
Okay. Yeah, I'd like to just kind of, now the dust is not settled, but at least
Yes.
we have a better sense of grant money and where it's going. So next time will help, so thank you.
Kevin, you mentioned the math interventionists. Any luck on, we found as many as we were hoping, or?
I don't have, I know we've been hiring. I don't have, and I'm sorry, Maria's not with us tonight, so
Okay.
I can find out and email that to everybody and see what we have left to hire.
Thanks.
Kevin, I think you should just keep going.
Keep going, you got it. So COVID update,
We're on to review and discuss, and the first one is COVID update.
Great.
Which, well, go ahead.
our favorite topic here. So number of things. So last week, as you know, in our COVID update, we did share plans to ask visitors who are coming to our schools to confirm that they're vaccinated. And so certainly while some view this as unnecessary, our thinking is that, it's one more step in a layered mitigation strategy, really to continue to provide safeguards to our students and staff against COVID-19. Over the past 18 months, as you know, our mitigation strategies have ranged from the most restrictive, full closure of schools, intermittent remote learning, moratorium on playground use, moratorium on allowing any visitors into the school buildings, to now less restrictive measures. So a return to more typical class sizes, activities and classroom configurations that are more typical, we're continuing universal masking. We continue with school cleaning protocols and increased ventilation, as well as utilization of outdoor spaces, and imposing social distancing during lunch waves. We also continue to contact trace and quarantine as necessary, and provide routine reminders for all of our school community members about the efficacy of vaccinations. So while we're continuing to find more ways to make our school day and our schools look and feel more normal, we also continue to implement protocols to safeguard against the potential risk brought about by returning to some of these in-person and more person-dense activities. With specific regard to visitors, we absolutely want to welcome visitors into our school buildings while also ensuring that we're taking reasonable steps to protect unvaccinated students and those who are medically fragile. Asking visitors to confirm they're vaccinated helps to provide a reassurance that we can reopen our buildings to visitors while also continuing this layered strategy approach. We do recognize that some prospective visitors may qualify for an exemption, and in those cases, we're directing prospective visitors to contact Maria Coleman. I just lost my second page. And Maria serves as our COVID liaison, and so working through HR, we think that's the most appropriate person to engage with. Maria will consider each request and then make decisions on a case-by-case basis. This is a approach that we're going to continue to refine. We're trying to be consistent with the governor's executive order around mandated teacher vaccinations, and so we're also creating an opportunity for visitors who may not be vaccinated to provide a negative COVID test, and that would provide clearance for them to be able to access our school buildings. So, we're not looking to be overly restrictive, and we also recognize that people come to our schools for lots of different reasons, for whether it's to volunteer in classrooms or, to do more routine business. And so we're trying to be flexible, but we do think it's important that, we have this as another strategy in our suite of strategies. So if you have questions, I'll stop on that one, and then I can continue with the COVID update.
Is there a way that we can any person who does not have a vaccination card or doesn't choose to show one or whatnot, can they just talk to Maria about what day they need to provide, as opposed to why they're not vaccinated, or getting approval to then be allowed to come in?
Yeah, I think so. Again, it's a refined strategy, and we also want to protect people's confidentiality, and so I think Maria in her office also needs a little bit of time. So we put in today's COVID update that protocol just to reach out to her, and like I said, we're not looking to unduly exclude people, but trying to strike that balance of ensuring safety and providing access. I think it just requires a little bit more attention.
So is it safe to say then that anybody can go into our schools if they have a vaccination card, or if they provide a
Yes.
negative PCR?
Yeah, correct.
Only because the way that you're saying it, I know the questions are going to come back.
Yeah, so I think I'm glad we're talking about it. So, and I think just it's healthy just to pause for another minute,
Sure.
and if you have other questions or clarifications, let's surface them.
Okay.
Well, because we just had a public comment about it, maybe just reach out to that person and just say, highlight
her
the
name.
update.
Yes.
Okay, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, you got it.
And then the update went out
This afternoon.
this afternoon. Okay, I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah,
Okay.
somewhere around 5 o'clock or so.
No, and you drew attention to it in the top.
So it's in the top, it's like,
Yes, thank you.
Good. We're trying to take
Sorry,
feedback.
I missed it last week.
That's okay.
'Cause I usually just look at the numbers, and I don't go beyond the numbers.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, a lot of people did.
No.
So this time you open it up and it lights up or flashing?
It
Does it flash?
flash in your face, but it lets you know that it's coming, so go look past the tracker.
Yeah.
That there's
Something else.
Okay.
No, that's
all right,
great, and I
okay.
think this is, so
Yeah.
there's a lot of details to communicate,
Sure,
and so,
sure.
we're always
Right.
taking the feedback and refining a process and just trying to, get the right information to the right people at the right time.
Well, the whole goal is to be safe, and if there are 2 or 3 different pathways to get
Yeah.
there, well, what I hear you saying is we're going to use them.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
Yep. So just the next update here is on staff vaccination rates. So we've nearly completed the certification of vaccine status for all of our employees. We have about 26 staff members so far who are still unconfirmed, and these are people who are were in our substitute ranks but are not currently active. A couple of coaches who are coach in the spring season, I think, and then the majority are contracted workers who come to us through continuing ed who are not currently working. So we're just continuing to reach out, but the universe of everybody else, all of our full-time employees, all of our other covered workers, we have that information. And so of our total staff in that entire universe, except for the 26 I just mentioned, we're 94% vaccinated, which is it's an extraordinary number. We're in the high 90s at Miller Driscoll and Middlebrook, and then I think the mid to low 90s I think high 90s at Miller Driscoll and the high school, and low to mid 90s at Cider Mill and Middlebrook. So I think they I don't know, 94% is great when you consider all of the folks in our system, that work in our schools. And so, to me, I was encouraged by that number, and I think that reflects a very strong commitment to health and safety and the health and safety of our kids and our staff. Unfortunately, we learned this afternoon that the surveillance program we ran last year and are relaunching soon does not meet the testing requirements for Executive Order 13G. So our hope was we could use this process to test at least weekly our unvaccinated staff. And so Tom St. Louis, the epidemiologist at the state, responded to my question today and said, per the executive order, this approach doesn't work. I did follow up with an email this afternoon to the Commissioner of Education explaining, again, what the process is. And, for my part, with respect to outcomes, I see no difference between what the executive order is requiring and, what this approach would achieve. So, I don't know that we'll get anywhere, but I'd like to get some flexibility here because I think the challenge, for us, and even given the fact that we have such a high percentage of people vaccinated, the logistics of managing and collecting information weekly, even from a handful of staff members, could be challenging. And so, we'd like to make it as efficient and as effective as possible.
So you're going to ask again?
So we're just going to, I think, right? We'll just keep asking. We'll just keep asking.
All right.
So, I think, again, to Jen's point a second ago, we've been fortunate so far and have had relatively few exposures and quarantines. Unfortunately, today, if you saw the COVID update, we did learn of a positive case today that's resulting in the quarantine of a staff member at Middlebrook, and then 9 students, 8 of whom are at Middlebrook and 1 who's at the high school. So that was not welcome news. That's the COVID update, and that might be a good segue to the next agenda item, which is our quarantine
Can I ask
learning
you
plan.
one question about
Yep.
that before we jump?
Please.
How are we, so kids are kids and can be cruel at times. How are we approaching our kids when somebody tests positive and other children have to quarantine because of it?
I would defer to the principals on that question. I don't know that we are, and I mean, we have a couple here in the room that could probably answer that better than I can. But, I think, I would say, we fall back to our culture and climate expectations in the school, and that's the expectation that kids are, kind and respectful. And then, in those instances when they're not, we do have, policies and procedures in place to respond. But I would, if you don't mind, I'll turn that question over to Jory and Bob, and then Jen and Catherine can weigh in, or Jen and Kathy can weigh in if they like.
Well, I can share that at least at Middlebrook, the kids themselves are the ones who are advertising the fact it's me. And so they're not shying away from, I'm quarantined, they're texting and notifying all their friends, hey, I'm the one that, brought it, or I'm the one that's going to be out, or kind of advertising it in probably a very naive way. But from what I've heard and seen, I have not seen an issue of other kids blaming or making that a difficult thing. It's kind of a, oh, gee, that stinks, I'm sorry, you gotta be out.
Okay.
So,
I guess I'd only, if we, as an administration, when we're sharing that with our kids, who then we pulled into a room and told them that they're going to be quarantined, if you guys could just reiterate that this is nobody's fault, it's not this person's fault who ended up getting it. Any of us could get it.
Thank you for saying that, because we do that, is exactly
Okay.
what we do. That's a club you don't want to be a part of, and
Correct.
they recognize that too, and especially for kids that go through it multiple times like they did last year. It's frustrating. It's frustrating to be caught in that spot where they recognize they got to be out for a while. So we do an awful lot to make sure they understand there's not a blame here.
Okay. Thank you.
And we haven't had any cases this year so far, fortunately. That was a concern we had last year, but it never came to fruition. I mean, we were wondering, would students want to single out a person who maybe was exposed and expose others? And to the credit of our kids, it never happened. So I'm just very proud of them and realizing that, the message that we're all community and we're all in this together, and this is not somebody's fault, I think is an important one to ring true.
Okay? Okay. Quarantine
I
learning?
think you're still on the roll here for
Yeah.
number 2.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quarantine.
Yep, so we have, tonight, Fran has been the chief facilitator working with district staff as well as the building principals and their staff to craft our quarantine learning plan, which remains in draft form, but Fran's going to take us through the high points tonight. So Fran, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone, and good evening. As Kevin was saying, this is actually a collaboration with basically everyone. There was collaboration with Maria, Eric, Andrea, and every building administrator has collaborated on it, and a number of teachers that have already been actually implementing this for the last couple of weeks as we've had some students in quarantine. So let me just give you some of the context and our thinking behind this plan. We started with, what was our purpose, and we wanted to keep students engaged in learning while they were out for the period of time that they are during quarantine period. We also wanted to leverage the technology that we put into place last year, including Schoology and all of the resources that we were able to put together. And we also really had in mind a sensitivity to ensuring that we didn't do what we called hybrid instruction, which was the model that we used last year, where teachers were, in a sense, doing dual teaching, is what I call it, because you're teaching to the students at home at the same time as the students in front of you, and engaging them in such a way where you try to make them actually be together and interact. So we also needed a way to be very flexible, because there are different needs at every different building. It's actually different for different classes and certainly individual students. So we had to develop a plan that was going to actually check all of those boxes. And so we started with some themes. And one of them was we were going to use Schoology as our communication and instructional delivery system, and actually use a lot of, what we've called asynchronous learning, and having work available for the students that are at home to be able to engage in. We also wanted to be able to have students that are at home for that period of time to, at some times, be able to engage directly in that classroom. So rather than making it hybrid, we have a term called live stream, which what that means is, if you think about webinars and how they work, although it's not set up exactly like that, because our Zoom program is not really a webinar, the ones that teachers use, but we've got certain settings and we've set it up in such a way that students can have a window into the classroom, but not necessarily be interacting, because that would take away from what the teachers are doing in person. So we wanted to balance those two. Then we basically looked at how this would be implemented at each of the schools. And that's where our, principals came in, and there are details in here that are really school by school. We have a Miller-Driscoll version, we have a cider mill, and then there's a 612 secondary version. Like I said, a lot of it is similar, so there are trends in all of it that are common, but there's a few differences that make sense in terms of what that, grade level appropriateness is. And then, of course, there's information on what do parents do in terms of helping students out with, being home, with the technology, where should they go for the information, and what are the expectations. There's another commonality in there about attendance, which is different than last year again. What we're doing is we're making it about work completion within Schoology, and so there are work assignments that are provided, and based on students being engaged and completing the work, they are able to be what we're calling quarantine present. So they're marked as being present in the classroom. And just, I think the idea that this is in draft form, I think needs to be also reiterated. We're continuing to receive feedback. Like I said, we've had, as you all know, we've had a number of students already in quarantine and receiving instruction from some of our teachers that have been out front and, pioneering this. And I think they're going to be perfect candidates to do focus groups and really talk to them about how did this work, how can we make it better as we kind of move forward, with hopes that this isn't something that continues and is big, but we don't really know. So I think that having this plan into place and being able to, serve the needs of students that are quarantined, I think is very important. With that, I can take some questions.
Do you mind if I just offer a couple more details, and then we can get into questions? So part of the work and the refinement around this plan has been also to listen very carefully to the feedback we got from teachers last year. And, thematically, as we were talking with staff, they said a couple of things, and France hit on some of those. One, obviously, you already know about it, was just the challenge, the real challenge they had about managing two environments simultaneously. And so that's why we're electing to avoid hybrid. Within that, teachers, of course, have lots of flexibility, to manage their own kids in their own way, and so we're going to provide these supports and structures, but the teacher's going to have lots of discretion, with these tools to support their kids. The other piece that I think is really important, and the teachers are asking for really clear guidance about this, is who gets to qualify for quarantine learning? And this is a question we've had a lot of conversation about. So to just kind of take you back in time a little bit, we made a choice a year ago during the pandemic to be really permissive with who gets to engage in remote learning. And so if people were quarantining for travel, if they were quarantining because they were exposed, if they were home for another reason, we allowed them to engage remotely. And personally, I was okay with that because there was so much uncertainty in the environment. This year, though, we're drawing very clear lines in the sand about who can access this kind of learning, and that's really to support our teachers and to reinforce with kids and families that if you can be in school, it is our expectation that you'll be in school. And so we're really fostering that mindset that kids need to be present if they can be. And so the quarantine learning, and even we're not calling it remote learning as a choice, we're calling it quarantine learning because this opportunity is reserved for kids who are having to quarantine because they're exposed to COVID-19. And so we're, kind of refining exactly what that trigger is. We're, presuming that, the nurse will have a list. And I think as part of that, too, in service to just, providing a little bit of support so teachers can plan appropriately, I think, maybe we can use today even as an example. So we learned late this afternoon that we have a handful of kids that have to quarantine. There may be, for some of those kids, some lag time tomorrow before they're actually accessing their classroom via live stream. And so what we're setting up with our teachers, and we're going to need to provide them some additional time to do this, is through Schoology to ensure that they have, at least initially, some asynchronous activities that they can engage with, while the teacher has a little bit of time to make contact, while we get the quarantine specialist set up, which I'll talk about in just a second. And then they'll have the schedule where they can access via live stream their classes. And so, we don't want anyone to be mistaken that this is, somehow going to be a proxy for actually being in the classroom full time. It's not. What we're trying to do is just, keep kids engaged and afloat while they're having to manage their quarantine period. I think the other piece that's really important to note is we're going to be leaning heavily on, this role that we're calling a quarantine support specialist. And, by type, what we're imagining is this will be, kind of a permanent building substitute. And so these people are not yet all in place. We're just having difficulty, finding full-time people. So, we're working as quickly as we can to put them in place. But we're imagining that once these folks are in place, this individual will be the first point of contact for a child when a child's out on quarantine. And so, just imagine, a facilitator. Jory, today when we were talking about it, referred to it, the role as a triage nurse. And, that's probably apt because we want someone to check in with the kid, make sure that a child has access to his or her Schoology account, can find the assignments, and then is clear, what the respective schedules are, so they can access their live stream. And then if a teacher is teaching and can't respond to a question from a kid that's on quarantine, we'll have the fallback that the kid can access this other person, this quarantine specialist. And so I don't expect it to be perfect. And I certainly, as Fran just said, we're again deliberately describing this as a draft. So, as we get more feedback from, the teachers who are managing quarantine learning, we'll continue to refine and improve. But our goal is really just to try to keep kids, engaged and keep them from falling behind terribly. I think so far, we've had a handful of folks at Cider Mill who've had to quarantine, and again, I wouldn't say it's been a great experience, but I think it's kept kids moving. And then, similarly, we have some kids over at Middlebrook today who've been quarantining, and, I think the teachers too have been, keeping in touch and just trying to keep them in the curriculum. So thank you for that.
Where are we currently in this process? So you said there was the Middlebrook quarantine that came through this afternoon. Are those kids starting tomorrow, starting Monday, or is the
Yes.
review only already up and going?
So I don't know what teams those students are on, so it's hard to say. And this is just me talking. I don't have the information in front of me. And so I would say it'll probably vary depending on where they are. So if it's another child that's, on a team that's already providing quarantine learning, and there's not a lot of setup, the kids probably will be able to jump right in. But if they're not, then there'll probably be some lag time, for the first part of the day tomorrow at least, where they're going to have to engage with some asynchronous work while that gets set up.
And we're moving towards the point where that won't be the case, that all classrooms will be, quarantine learning ready?
I can't say to you, Ruth, in fairness to, just to the range of staff we have, that every teacher will be prepared at some point in time to immediately jump to quarantine learning. That's why we also have the specialist in place, or will have the specialist in place, just so there is an immediate point of contact.
But I mean, more like, even if the teacher, but the infrastructure.
Yes.
Set and ready to go.
Yeah, and so
there's no lag on that end.
there ought not to be.
So the other part of it is that there is a lot of prep on the teacher's part that isn't in Schoology. So if you think about what's already in there, we've got our units, we've got our learning resources, that's been in there since last year. And teachers continue to update, as time goes on. But if a student or students in that classroom are quarantined, they also have to set up like a schedule and updates and, put the information in terms of when they're going to be live streaming and when it's going to be asynchronous. So that in of itself might take time to just start up. And I think to Kevin's point, once there's a quarantine learning specialist, the coordination of, meeting with those students and saying, this is where you need to go today, and getting that set up in the morning will facilitate having that happen sooner.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of why, in some instances, there's probably going to be a bit of a lag. So we were doing some brainstorming with some of the Middlebrook staff, and so understanding that they operate on a team, one of the staff members was imagining, if they've got, multiple kids on that team, but they're in different classes, that they'd want to regroup the kids that are on quarantine, so they follow a similar schedule. So when the math teacher is, teaching a lesson and has kids that are streaming in, they're all together at once. And then similar, for each of the other teachers, as a way to just manage, some of the efficiency of the technology. So, those are pieces that I think, still require some refinement. And, if you can imagine, working, whether it's through an administrator or with the quarantine specialist, kind of on the fly, having to reorganize kids' days, that would certainly invite some lag time before they're, fully ready to go.
All right, Kevin, I understand that part, right? I understand. Same with kids, got to figure out their classes. I'm struggling with the live streaming part. Why our teachers aren't ready? Like, what's the lead time between them knowing that a child in their team or class has been quarantined to them being able to flip on the camera or whatever the program is, and how to work?
Yeah, I don't know that it's so much a matter of simply flipping on the camera. One of the teachers I was speaking to yesterday noted that while he's got his camera, if you remember last year, we had like a multi-screen setup.
Yep.
And so, there was some, just some, like technology considerations about how you flip through different screens, whether you're broadcasting the smartboard or whether you're streaming through the camera. So I think those are some of the things that, they just need to sort out. And this is why the teachers just need time to figure all of that out to make sure that they're ready. So, in terms of how much of a lag time, I really can't say that I wouldn't imagine it's extensive, but I don't think that it's simple as just turning the thing on. And that's what I heard. That was some of the feedback I heard yesterday.
Okay, so it's different than our kids zooming in. I mean, I get that they can't communicate, they're just watching, but it's not like we're zooming in and that's what we're doing. It's something different. I'm just.
Well, so, yeah, and I think, so it's a great question, and, this is where I think we all just need to remember, and I'll use myself as an example, because I think I was coming into this summer as we were thinking and planning and talking about it, thinking, well, what's the problem? You just turn the camera on and the kids are there and they can watch and things are happening. But, I'm not a teacher in the classroom, and, the feedback that we're getting from the teachers, and, is, the classroom environment's dynamic. And so there are some classrooms in some moments, and so we'll just use the math teacher example. I was talking with this gentleman yesterday, and, he said in his case, right, he would want his camera on the smartboard because he is directing lessons at the smartboard, he's modeling and so on. But that's not necessarily true, for every teacher in every class. And so for some other teachers, it might be you're zooming, through the computer screen, or you might be, looking directly at the teacher. And so it's just some of these, I don't think there are significant variances, but, they're enough that they require some additional thought and planning.
I guess I just thought, based on everything we went through last year, that this would be a little bit of an easier transition.
Yes.
And I
Understood.
completely support not doing hybrid. It's not fair to our teachers. It's not fair to either set of kids either. Like, everybody's missing something. So I do think this is a better way. I guess I'm struggling with the.
Yeah, fair enough. And
a more smooth situation.
I do think that it's going to change as time goes on.
And I guess, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
My point is, like, we know this is going to happen. Like, our people are going to get COVID, and we are going to have to quarantine. So I'm just wondering, is there a way that we can get ready so that we're not waiting for it to happen, and then we're trying to put a plan in place?
yeah, well, Jen, I wouldn't say they're not ready, and I think, when we talk about a lag time or, readiness, we're also reflecting just the dynamic nature of teaching and learning in the classroom, because it's, you're hitting class periods at different times, and you're in different phases of instruction. I think, to your point in wondering, if we think about the Cider Mill example, and I'll use my son as an example, he was quarantined a week ago, in his class, it was almost instantaneous.
Okay.
And so, they were ready. I think I have to imagine that there probably was some scrambling in the background.
And I'm sure, and I would totally expect that.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe I'm hoping that our norm is that it's instant, but we can expect that on some occasions that there will be a lag, as opposed to our norm is that there's going to be a lag and maybe.
Yeah.
it might be-
And I think hopefully what you're hearing from me too is I want to manage expectations, because not everything works perfectly in every case. And so I'd rather, frankly, undersell than oversell. And I just want to be realistic about, we were talking hundreds of teachers across, that many classrooms, and it's not perfect in every instance.
Right. Just want to make sure that if there's a way that we can be ready, that we're ready.
Yes, and so I'll tell you, lots of people have been working on this, and the administrators and the teachers too are committed to that.
Okay.
I think one of the more important pieces is the idea of quarantine present and what the criteria is for qualifying. And I think that communicating that out directly and succinctly and how that works will be important.
Yep.
And the teachers have been a very big part of, developing what the assignments would be and, how to check in, ensuring that students have really engaged in the learning for that day in order to mark them quarantine present, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous in terms of their participation.
If a teacher has one student who's in quarantine, would he have the option to do a hybrid arrangement where the kid that can talk and participate? I mean, why are we saying no to hybrid?
It basically, hybrid is something that is, as you know, we did last year, and it is, it wasn't a perfect situation, and.
Well, but I'm sure there were some teachers who did it quite well. And if a teacher feels comfortable in doing it and having the student participate and being there, and why can't the teacher do that?
I think this is an example that it sounds simpler than it actually is, and so some of the overwhelming amount of feedback we got from staff across the upper three schools was when they're this is what they're saying to us, and I accept that there's also a continuum of effectiveness across our staff, but what I heard loud and clear was our teachers felt ineffective because their attention was divided. And, what contributed to that? Could you say it was, because there was more than one kid or only one kid? I think, that probably comes down to individual circumstances. But thematically, that feedback was overwhelming. And I think also, we, based on that feedback, we're trying to set up some structures that, again, far from perfect, but are, hopefully supportive to the student, hopefully supportive to the teacher. And we also know that, we have highly professional staff who have their students' best interests in mind and are going to make choices that are in the best interest of their students. And it has to be all the students in front of them, as well as, the students who are stuck at home in quarantine.
And then I think to Kevin's point, it was overwhelming with their teachers, but it was also many of our kids felt the same way, that whether they were at home or whether they were in the building, they kind of felt like they were missing half. Because the teacher is divided, they're talking to this person, but they're looking this way, and it was just a lot of for everybody.
Yeah, but last year was different from this year. This year, we're talking minimal numbers of students, one, maybe two. I mean, last year, it was classes, half a class or whatever.
Right.
And this year is very different. The teacher wanted to do a hybrid arrangement with one kid. Why couldn't he do that?
Right. Well, again, I think,
Well, I think this is a starting
you.
place.
Yeah, no, I'm just
And
asking the question.
Right, and I have to say that I'm on this CABE list, this Connecticut Bowl. So anyway, I see a lot of questions from board chairs or board members, like, what are you going to do for quarantine kids? A lot of the answer is, we're going to give them packets of material.
Right.
So the fact that we have, I think, a plan that, certainly was collaboratively developed, it's grade level specific, it's subject area specific, and it does use a range of tools, I think is a tremendous credit to our faculty.
No, I understand that.
Yeah, I know, they pulled off miracles, but I was in classrooms last year just a little bit to watch the hybrid. There are so many balls you have to juggle to do it correctly, that to open up a camera at all, this year, I understand sort of a little bit of like oh my gosh, because you don't want to take away from the in-person learning.
Okay.
So I think if we can open the camera to visual and listen-only mode, that's going to gain the most for the kid, distract the least from the kids in the class,
Okay.
and be as smooth as possible for the teacher. And I think that's all we can
Okay.
hope for besides no quarantine,
Okay.
right?
We definitely need to hope for no quarantine.
Yeah. Or minimal amount of quarantines.
Can we end this segment on a positive note?
Yeah.
Please.
I think they've done tremendously
I'll
here.
speak from the middle school perspective and the high school perspective, because that's where my kids are. The number of teachers who are doing paper teaching as opposed to being on a screen has been a lot. And I truly appreciate it for getting our kids off the screens. So those of your teachers that are doing it, thank you. But it's been quite a few of them. And the buzz around town is happy about it.
That is a great positive note. A good way to end that section.
Do you have the next one too? No, I'm just kidding.
Guys?
School action plans, Middlebrook and the high school tonight.
Great. So welcome, Dory. Welcome,
Yes.
Bob. And we'll start with Mr. Higgins.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and I'm happy to hear speak about Middlebrook and what we're doing. There's exciting things that are happening around the building. Thank you to Lucille for taking care of the document for us as we work through it. But as you look at the document, the very top of it, the language here hopefully is nothing new to any of you that Kathy and Jen spoke to at the last meeting, and it provides the overarching perspective from the district point of view. And the sense of care for students and building self-efficacy in them is based in all of this work. The nurturing of a culture of collective ownership and shared leadership, the engaging families and community as partners is kind of the overarching umbrella from a district perspective. I want to pause for a second because at the very top it talks about we, if we, and talk about this for a second for what that means, because we're blessed to work with incredibly passionate and caring, dedicated professionals who create this culture of care for their students. And it's important to understand all this work that you're going to hear about in a minute must incorporate that social, emotional well-being of the students. And as mentioned a minute ago, their self-efficacy, or if you will, their confidence and desire to do their best and understand that we stand ready to help them when they need it. Just this week, I can give you a wonderful example of this. An 8th grade social studies teacher, who when she hears this will be very embarrassed that I'm pointing this out, but 8th grade social studies teacher shared that the team has been emphasizing the importance of taking notes, note-taking, and how to do it and how to do it well. And she said, and I quote, she was blown away by the high quality of notes the students were able to produce. And this is on the Enlightenment, not an easy subject. And she said, students of differing abilities were able to produce awesome notes that were focused, organized, and well thought. And she was advertising this to her teammates to say, hey, look at what our kids are doing. So it's just a quick example of how teachers go about celebrating what the kids are doing. So that well-being for the students and our collective desire to help them build that, help them feel good about it is really the basis for all this. And honestly, whatever else I say about the action plan, then it wouldn't matter. So that we at the top is very, very important. So from that district theory of action, what does that look like at Middlebrook? You'll see similarities again to the work that you heard from Kathy and Jen last week, and you hear from Bob momentarily. The collective ownership and shared leadership around student success using the accelerated framework. The assessment information to plan instruction that's responsive to students' academic and social emotional needs. And then engaging families and the community as partners in the children's success. So from there we have the essential question to nurture the culture of collective responsibility and then goals to make it happen. So with the goals, the backdrop of the accelerated learning and student performance is demonstrated on standardized testing in reading and math, the culturally responsive instruction by increasing interactions with materials and activities that reflect the cultural differences of our student body, and continue really to connect with our families in a trusting, respectful, supportive relationship with families and students. So as we drop down to the action steps, just a quick reminder of the format here. You'll see the corresponding goal to the left, and then the action steps. Reading across, you'll see the time frame, who's responsible for doing what, the resources, and then the potential barriers and results or outcomes. So I'm not going to read this to you, but I just want to highlight aspects of the action plan to bring it to life for you. We've already started this work to encourage that shared ownership of success already in our building. We want to make sure not to lose sight of that responsive lesson planning throughout our scheduled professional development this year. All the teams, the administrative team, the IETs, we all need to demonstrate this through our efforts throughout the year. An interesting aspect of initially sharing this with our leadership team was that, our focus was really with our humanities and math departments, and our leadership were very clear to say, hey, wait a second, let's make sure we're including STRIDE, world language, our support services, and keeping all of those departments in the loop. And quite honestly, it was kind of a wonderful feeling that they really were saying this is going to be a team approach across the building. It's not specific to just math and reading. So we had already introduced the acceleration framework to some of our staff last spring, and that's thanks in large part to the work of our coordinators, Karen and Trudy. So it wasn't brand new for everyone this fall. But as we introduce, or for some, or introduce it to others this fall, we're making sure to hold steady to our scheduling for professional development and keeping a focus on that schedule. So after starting with the introduction of these frameworks and making sure that we have a common understanding of the language, as well as paying attention to the potential barriers and anticipate some of the pitfalls, the old idea of the imperative versus the important competing with each other. So next we want to encourage IETs in specific planning to improve the student growth and achievement. Just this week we had professional development specifically to look at the results and then how that's going to inform our teaching and learning. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Let's say, for example, that students struggle with analyzing the relationship between dependent and independent variables. We want to work to point our instruction towards the units of instruction and the standards we're trying to reach to make sure that we're keeping alignment or potentially compressing certain grade level standards into instruction. And the main reason there is because we know the standards continue into the next grade level. And there's, and keeping the students at grade level work is the important work here. A non-math example would be if we recognize that a student or group of students struggle with analysis within or across informational text, we want to make sure that we realize that that learning didn't stick for those students, so that we want to make sure we address that as well. So throughout this document, you're going to see those sorts of things where we recognize and name the potential barriers, mostly of the time stealers, and by naming it, we're hoping to also keep our eye on that prize in the end. We'll measure our success constantly. We should see it in the richness and depth of not only the conversations that lead to the shift in planning, but ultimately in our instruction. That in turn will positively impact the student performance. So sliding down a bit, we want to make sure we increase and improve the use of interim assessments, keeping in mind that there are months between the administration of the MAP assessment. So we want to make sure we have the ability to track progress along the way and make the necessary adjustments to be successful, help the kids be successful. And then as we monitor the 3 MAP assessments, we want to make sure we identify areas needed for targeted instruction. Our coaches will be an important resource to the classroom teachers in this effort. And we're going to work with the IETs as well to make sure that they look for observable work, examples of evidence, for example, of scaffolding, or what are we putting in place, how's it working, how do we know. We're also scheduling administrative participation in IETs regularly, but specifically monthly to look at the student progress. So throughout the year, we've planned the professional development. We've got the modules in place to support the work on the acceleration framework, and we're going to track that progress through a results-based coaching tool. The last action step attached to these first 2 goals is really to create opportunities for reciprocal observation for teachers. That's focused on an element of the acceleration framework, and it's a critical friends approach, if you will, where smart individuals can come together and observe each other and discuss strategies for improving instruction and refining it as well. So shifting to our last 2 goals, I'll try to be a little quicker through this, but you'll see and hear language that's similar in all of the buildings across the district. So the third one, culturally responsive teaching, the action steps include incorporating culturally diverse literature and providing interactions with materials and activities that are reflective of the cultural differences of our student body, identifying connections within the curriculum, and then with opportunity to incorporate a more diverse content, where culturally diverse lesson plans and content are created and implemented. And then in addition, our District Equity and Inclusion Committee will be developing and providing professional development throughout the year as well. And then our last area, and then I'll stop talking, pause for questions, is our family school partnerships. Students cannot be successful without that third part of the triangle, students, teachers, and families. So you'll see and hear from us and the district that any of our open houses, you'll hear from every one of the teachers how communication is key. And creating the opportunities for clear and open communications for school and home is nothing new, but it's a renewed focus and for supporting our children. And one example, certainly at Middlebrook, is our Friday letter that goes out, obviously, every Friday, you might have guessed. Additionally, in conjunction with our wonderfully supportive PTA, we're coordinating and engaging our parent community in meeting the academic and social emotional needs of our children. Quite honestly, we wouldn't be successful without that partnership. So our team will engage with organizations outside the community to provide support for our youth. And we're going to create opportunities for parents to meet with our resident experts, as we have in the past. But you know, the examples in the past might have included things like how to better understand Schoology or Power School. Our SROs have provided information to parents on social media and look for us for parents. In the past, those been known as Coffee with the Principal, and those that know me know that I don't drink coffee, so I just want you to know I'm okay with the title. It'll be all right. We'll keep it that way. And finally, I just want to add that we're really excited by this work, and we truly appreciate the weight, the importance of it, and happy to answer any questions. Sorry if that was too quick.
Sure, I think this question came up last time, and this is sort of more global and perhaps better for Chuck, but with our goals, the percentage of students who will meet or exceed grade level standards, I just keep wondering if it could be pushed up a little bit, and I don't know whether it's better to be aspirational or what, but it implies a fairly large percentage of kids who might not, and sometimes that seems a little high when you do the math and you go, if 80% are making it, that means 20% aren't, and I don't think we would be happy with that. So again, I'm trying to be realistic. I don't want to be driven by numbers, but I'm just wondering what our goal should be there, that's all. And I think it came up last time, so I'm not trying to pick on Middlebrook at all.
Thank you.
It's just asking a very general question.
Okay.
And then, you know, I'm in the be careful what I wish for framework, because one thing we talked about last year was sort of using data more regularly. And there's so much data in here that I hope do you think it's the right amount, or do you think we're overloading?
Well,
Do you know what I mean?
I think I do. You know,
are we counting too? I mean, it used to. I mean, I was always saying we need more data, and so here you're getting even more formal about your IET data teams, et cetera, which is, I think, great and important. But I just hope I haven't wished for too much of a good thing.
Well, admittedly, I think that's part of the shift for us. You know, administratively, we didn't necessarily sit with any kind of regularity and look at the student scores and say, okay, now what? And we're going to be doing more of that. We'll be doing that more as grade level teams, as IETs, et cetera. So there's certainly a heightened awareness about all of that. But I think, you know, the professional development that happened yesterday, and that was thanks to Tim Neville, who came and spoke to our staff, who really identified how you can take a score, and then what does that mean, and then what does that mean for your instruction? Okay. What are the specific standards that these children are demonstrating a lack of understanding on? And that way our units of instruction and our standards can be aligned, so that it's not a guessing game as to this child is in this arena of maybe the 20%. What does that mean? It's what are the skills that they're demonstrating they're not meeting benchmark on.
And then I thought the description that Kevin shared with us yesterday on
The
an
IET.
IET team was great. So I just thank you for all the sort of in-depth work and all of that. So, yeah, it's carefully thought out, except for maybe the goal number itself, for me, anyway.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Yeah, I want to second the goal, the 80% thing. Yeah, I mean, if we're going to go, I think we were 6th in the ranking.
According to niche.com.
Okay. How do we get to 3rd or 4th or 5th? Is 80%, is accepting 80% the number that's going to get us there?
Well, if you read the article, they also devalued SAT
lot of
and ACT,
content.
so, but I take your point.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all. It's just,
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
how do we get from
Yeah.
6th to 3rd?
Yeah, I think that, the challenge is, we hear you, I definitely hear you, and it's a conversation that's, not, it's not a done deal, and I think, understanding where our kids are
Oh,
too
yeah. Yeah.
is big, and so I think again, we want to. It's that balance between, being truly aspirational and overshooting the mark, and also,
realistic.
underrepresenting
Right.
our. So,
Okay.
so I think we're in conversation about
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
we hear you.
Okay.
If you don't mind, Jen, you made a comment yesterday, and it was one that I take very seriously about, sometimes at this level, we talk about things and then you just wonder, like, do they actually come into play in the classroom? And so, I thought, you made that point again yesterday with the description of the IET, but the focus of these plans, like really the thrust of this work is classroom teacher work. And so, the effort is to set up the structures so that our teachers are best equipped to have the information in front of them that they need to make, good real-time decisions about kids, and then, for all of us to be able to step back from that and look at growth over time. And so, my intention as part of this to invite all of you into the classroom to see some of these
Good.
things unfolding in real time, so you can actually, see the connections. And I think the challenge, as Jory was describing, some of these practices, while they're not new practices for everybody, they're new for some. And so our challenge as a district is to bring them to scale.
Great. Okay. Any other comments from Middlebrook?
Thank you. So,
Thank you. Thank you
Dr.
very
O'Donnell?
much.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. So we're pleased to report on our Wilton High School Warrior Action Plan. And we're going to focus as well on the accelerated learning framework. And as you can see from our theory of action that applies to goals 1 and 2, these are our math and ELA goals, which are clearly important goals for us. So process-wise, we met at the District Leadership Institute, and we agreed that we would adopt this accelerated learning framework. We really bought into it under Kevin and Chuck's leadership. So in our own Wilton High School Leadership Institute, we presented this framework to the Wilton High School leadership team. They really liked it. They adopted it, and as Brian and I were talking earlier, they gave it quite a warm embrace. It was very well received. So at this point, the instructional leaders have rolled this out during initial department meetings and also in their IETs for our teachers. And we've got some really good coherence right now across the departments around this accelerated learning framework. As an admin team, we always go out and we participate in the IETs, and right away we heard conversations around some of the tenets of this accelerated learning framework that I'm going to discuss a little bit in our theory of action. In addition, the administrators and the instructional coaches and the ILs are working to educate the staff about the framework and how to implement it. And this really is part of the work, as Dr. Smith said. And I would reinforce what he said. If you want to come out and visit our classrooms, come out and see the wonderful learning going on. I had the opportunity just in the last couple of days to be in science and math classrooms. The red carpet is open to you. Okay? So Lucille, as I go into the theory of action, I'm going to ask you if you would just click on that link to the accelerated learning framework, that would be helpful to us. Okay. All right.
Sorry.
I have it in front of me, which is fine. So, if you have the language in front of you, so our theory of action for these important goals, the math and ELA goals, are really focused on these important constructs in the theory of action and the accelerated learning framework. So, we talk about creating high-quality formative assessments, using data teams in a collaborative setting around district and course and classroom assessment results, reviewing current academic tasks to ensure alignment to standards and the appropriate level of rigor at this time, and also identifying the necessary scaffolds that learning is accessible to all of our students and they're supported in trying to reach their high learning goals. We're engaged in progress monitoring, and then really what's really important is to make the students aware of their growth. We try to take a strengths-based approach so that their growth areas, in addition to their strengths, and build their self-efficacy, which is one of the constructs of the accelerated learning framework, and we feel that's very important. So our goal in our theory of action is to accelerate learning, have students show higher academic growth, less variability across classrooms, and then just be confident about their work in the school setting. And then finally here, just in terms of our theory of action, we really want to actualize the portrait of the graduate. We're starting to roll that out in the school community. We believe if we do these things, these aforementioned items, students will meet the goals of the portrait of the graduate. So some of the specific action steps under mathematics, and I'm going to talk about mathematics, and Brian will talk about English. Specifically, our goals here. Our goal in mathematics is to raise our achievement on the Connecticut SAT, which of course is our benchmark assessment, from 76% to 80%. In spite of the previous conversation, that is an aggressive goal right now that we're working with these students. If we can get to 80% with this cohort of juniors, we will feel very good about that. And we want to raise the EBRW, evidence-based reading and writing, from 92 to 94%. It's noteworthy that actually our goal, our achievement last year on the SAT, we actually, in spite of the pandemic, we raised our achievement. So in terms of literacy, English and social studies, we're very proud of that, and our teachers are very proud of that. So specifically in mathematics, and this work is already ongoing. I mean, our teachers embrace this work under our leadership right at the beginning of the year. So the math teachers, so I'm on the action steps now under mathematics in the left-hand column. So the teachers are engaged in these IETs, these instructional effectiveness teams, and they're working on ensuring that they can get together and work on this acceleration framework. Analyzing data and doing what we call data team training. We actually did the data team training last year with the support of CES, Cooperative Educational Services, with the math department. So the math department was able to hit the ground running this year. We actually used that model as we rolled it out to all the instructional leaders as we try to propagate and promote this data team model throughout the different departments. We have already built into, under Mr. Keating's expertise with the master schedule taking over, we've got common planning time for teachers in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2 and geometry so that they can get together and implement these strategies. Big piece of this right now is monitoring the progress of the students in the 2-year Algebra 1 class, which is already ongoing in that class right now. And then just in terms of the data analyses, what we're doing, we're analyzing the 2021 PSAT and SAT data to identify the students who did not meet the benchmark, and then identify what do we need to narrow the gap instructionally. And as teachers engage in what we describe as common informative assessments, also to identify where students' strengths and weaknesses are, they're more in tune and can be more granular about specific personalized instruction for students, which is the key for all of the students, not just the students who are not meeting benchmark. This next step is new. We had some success over the summer with the Horizon program, so we will be administering this very soon to all of our juniors. And we feel that this is a good step to get good feedback on student performance. It'll be a benchmark assessment that we can assess where the students are, get a sense of where their skill sets are, where there may be gaps and weaknesses, and then use that to inform instruction. So in addition to the PSAT, we'll be administering the Horizon program. We'll get real-time feedback, which, based on the feedback we've gotten from Trudy Denton, is really quite granular and quite helpful to our teachers. So we're hoping that's going to be an excellent step towards really, again, personalized instruction for our mathematics students. So we're looking forward to that, actually, of course, as you would imagine. And couple more final steps here. And this is the key that I've alluded to, using these data points to personalize instruction for the students, the idea that each cohort of a certain section of a course is different, and that there's a range of learners in there, and how do we meet all the students' needs is going to be the focus for our teachers. This is not a new step, but as you're aware, you've heard this, the math department we'll implement SAT-type strategies and problems into the regular curriculum. We've always prided ourselves in not taking students offline for a number of weeks as these important tests approach, but rather integrating it thoughtfully into the curriculum so that we're moving the curriculum along. So that's a big part of just our ethos and our belief of how we have high-quality instruction in the Wilton Public Schools. And then analyzing the data from these CFAs, the Common Formative Assessments, again, in the IET. So when I was discussing this recently with Cindy Cherico and Dr. Evelyn Sable, they were really quick to point out, this is already going on. They have the work in place and the model in place for the data team process. And talking to Cindy earlier in the week on Monday, she said, you know what, we've already administered our first Common Formative Assessments. And by Wednesday, these teachers will be engaged in this data team work in these IETs. So just for example, there are IETs in geometry, in Algebra 1, in Algebra 2, in pre-calc. So the teachers are engaged in this thoughtful work to try to ultimately just help all of our students achieve. So there's a lot of really good work going on. It's thoughtful, it's based on the accelerated learning framework, it's research-based, and we are looking forward to right now administering the Horizon Assessment and also get the PSAT data so we can keep moving forward. Mr. Keating?
Just to add a little bit about the work going on in math, because I have been involved in those efforts. I do just want to say a few things about our instructional coaches. They've been helping out with all of our planning and all of the groundwork that needs to be laid out for our analysis of the data. So one thing that has been clear, I hope, in our plan is that we are going to collect and analyze a lot of data, and that is fitting into our acceleration framework so that we can figure out what our priorities are and then have our analysis with the results and then have our responsive teaching. So one thing that, like Dr. O'Donnell had mentioned, one thing that I have found quite refreshing is that in spending time with the math teachers at department meetings or in their IETs, there's already an adoption, if it hasn't already been, in their just pedagogical approach. There already is an adoption of this type of cycle. So we're front-loading a lot of data collection and analysis at the beginning of the year, and I think that it will lead very nicely into our design task work that we're going to do too. That's part of our acceleration framework. Then to take that and dovetail into what we're doing with our ELA efforts, and that for the most part comes with our English department, but also with our social studies department. And I know that there are all departments are working towards our understanding of these skills that we're measuring with our ELA work and the SAT and PSAT. Everything contributes to it. Just to highlight, like Dr. O'Donnell did, and as you see here, as noted with the number 2 in the far left-hand column, we do have some PSAT and SAT data from previous years, and we will be taking a look in December when the October PSAT results come in. We'll be taking a look at that information to see where we do have our strengths and where we do have areas of growth, where we can focus and have our responsive teaching efforts really pinpointed. We definitely will be doing that so that we are identifying those students, especially those that are right on the cusp, right, often referred to as our goal huggers, to make sure that where we can boost specifically that group of students who are very close to achieving goal, we're smart and strategic about it. But at the same time, we want to make sure that everybody is making growth too. So it's not just those students that are right on the cusp of entering that new category for their performance, but all. And I believe that it was mentioned when we were talking about the Middlebrook model, but one thing that we want to do, especially with the English and Social Studies, is make sure that as we have many electives in both departments, that we are aware of what we would say are the alignments and the progressions from 9th grade to 10th grade, 10th grade to 11th, 11th to 12th, so that we aren't duplicating our efforts for what we say is priority. And so that leads to just our third item here with the number 2 next to it, reviewing the written curriculum that we do have to make sure that we are aware of what we are considering to be grade level, so that we're pinpointing our efforts, not duplicating unnecessarily, possibly recycling, but making sure that we have that vertical alignment to maximize our time and efforts with our students. Another thing that we've already started talking about, the English department, I've stopped into some of their department meetings and their IET time too, and the idea that we will be spending time looking at how to better shape some tasks so that we have more pinpointed tasks for students, content for them to wrestle with, learning and comprehension to gain, and then information for students for teachers to look at to see where we go next and how we are responsive with that. That's also part of our process, and although we have not taken steps to really enact that just yet, we're on our way. We've been spending more of our time with common formative assessments to see what data the data presents to us for where are our students and how can we help to scaffold them, scaffold the learning that they're doing. A few other things that we're doing just to make sure that it is clear too, very much aligned with what we're doing in math. We wouldn't want to just teach to the test, as Dr. O'Donnell was alluding to. It's something that we don't necessarily want to do. However, the English and social studies teachers have it blended into the curriculum, so these skills are part of the curriculum. It's also valuable for the practice for the SAT and PSATs, and it's also what they would consider to be valuable skills that the students would gain from the time in class. So to take work that they already have, and some references we have in here to already released, publicly released items for the SAT that can work separately and discreetly, but they also have plenty of assignments that they've already worked on that match up and align to those skills that we want the curriculum to make sure the students are following, but also that we measure with the SAT and PSAT. They've already got that embedded, already working on that. And lastly, I would say that both math and English, so this goes to, yep, thank you, Lucille. This goes to the next one, just to reiterate that our instructional coaches, Michelle Marr and Eric Mendelson, have already proved themselves to be invaluable with how they are helping really pyramid out our work for how the data team process will be most effective and how they can support the teachers with doing a lot of the heavy lifting with the initial data curation so that the teachers can then have an easy time with getting to the granular level.
Would you like us to do a very brief overview of goals in 3 and 4? Parent partnerships and culturally responsive teaching?
Yeah, as long as it's brief.
Very brief. So the third goal here is really all about building a welcoming community and a supportive community with our parents based on open communication, family and community engagement, having some feedback from parents on shared decision-making, and engaging in school programs in a really inclusive environment. So just a couple brief examples. Lucille actually already has them on the screen. We already held, for example, a parent panel for all of our freshman parents and any parents new to Wilton High School. We had a group of our veteran parents there who were presenting about the wonderful program here, but also how to navigate the system and the programs and understand how their students can be successful in the program. We have a very, very cooperative and supportive relationship with our PTSA president, our PTSA, and we do often talk to that, that group about, just ideas and use them as a sounding board. So, and in here, a lot of these other action steps we'll talk about just community engagement with partners in the community, including the Chamber of Commerce, the SROs, the Wilton Police Department. There's a lot of great work going on between the school and the town, and we pride ourselves on that, and we're going to focus on these parts of the action step. And the culturally responsive teaching is even a little more brief. Mr. Keating?
Without a doubt, we have already put into place some work with our tri-chairs where we have been talking about professional learning that's going to be put into place to make sure that we're sharpening any efforts with culturally responsive teaching and any of the thought that goes with that. And we've also spent time planning for how our instructional leadership team will be able to provide feedback and work with the teachers as they're going through this. So without spending too much time and trying to be brief, we've already got the groundwork laid for efforts in that direction.
Questions, comments?
Yeah, just one. As it goes to, there are 8 different action steps or categories that you have listed under Goal 2. And the only common thread that runs through all of them is the barrier of time. Every one of those, time is a barrier.
Sure is.
So I guess my question would be, of those 8, could it be 6 or could it be 5? And you have the time then to ensure that you accomplish. I mean, I would challenge you to go back and look at that. This is the only one where every barrier of all 8 is a barrier of time. So can you effectively do all of those 8 things as opposed to, all right, what are the most critical? What are the top 5 things we want to focus on? Make sure we get those done. I would only ask, challenge you to go back and take a look, because time is a barrier for all of those.
Yeah. It's a point well taken. The challenge we face at the high school is that the amount of time allotted for IETs is relatively minimal, and they all take place at the same time.
Yeah, I know. I mean, so you got to sit down and be hard-nosed about, all right, look, we're not going to be able to do these 3, but these other 5, if we really focus and do it well, we can make it. We can make the progress we need to make. That's my question, my challenge.
Thank you, Mr. Holt.
Okay, it's yours is the only one that, in every one of the barrier is time.
Other questions, comments?
Thank you for your time.
It's very detailed and very ambitious, and
All 4 of the plans.
Yeah.
All 4 of the buildings. Everybody's to be congratulated on.
Very thoughtful.
Incredible
So,
amount of work.
in terms of next steps, do we hear like an update mid-year? I mean,
So before,
what's
Chuck and
the
I were
follow-up?
talking about that yesterday, and so I
Okay.
think, one of the challenges that's in front of us is, really establishing data review cycles. And as the board talked, maybe the last time we met or after the Accelerated Learning Workshop, there was a commitment at that time or a request to have more routine updates. So what Chuck is planning across the schools are kind of district-level data review cycles with the administrators at about 6-week intervals. And so we have to get it set up, but what I'm anticipating is I will follow up, or we will follow up with all of you and about that cycle, and we'll actually, hopefully have some stuff to talk about, because we're at least at the 3-8 level, we'll be using the interim assessment benchmarks. And so we're thinking we should be able to accurately monitor progress, report that out in between some of those bigger benchmark assessments.
Right. And even if it's just the high notes, the highlights or the most notable something from the latest round.
Sure.
You don't want to create more work just for us.
No, I think, but here's I think, thinking about mindset shift,
Yeah.
this is also part of the work, and something,
Okay.
again, I know I'm not the only one that's been thinking a lot about this, and I don't want you to get the wrong impression that, somehow we're not going to be focused on teaching because we're focused on data. That's not the case. But we need to really implement and monitor these systems, and so we do have, at the teacher level, at the student level, at this level, as clear understanding as we can possibly achieve of where, groups of kids are and how well or not they're growing towards our goals. And so I think having, this extra, for lack of a better term, kind of, accountability opportunity with the board, I think it'll just be, one more piece that helps keep us, focused in the right direction. And when we're confronted with distraction to, again, push us back and keep us focused. So I'm very comfortable with, again, don't hold me to it tonight, but about 6-week intervals where we're providing, some update around data. And certainly, in between those moments, we can also provide, more qualitative information just to, keep you abreast of what's happening and, what challenges we might be confronting.
I think they kind of go hand in hand, right? I mean, you can't effectively teach an entire group of kids if you don't somehow assess them and know where kids are in their learning process.
That's right.
And then also how they're responding to what you're doing to get them to the next.
Yeah, you got it. You're absolutely right. And that's something, we know, assessment is not separate from instruction. It's part of instruction. And so, to be, jargony, we talk about assessment for learning, and that's absolutely right. And so again, it's, it's a question of, implementing some of these practices at scale, with fidelity.
Okay, now we're going to talk about facilities, specifically Genesis.
Yes, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I wrote to you a couple of weeks ago, and I'll just review the high points here. But at the end of the school year last year, the Genesis team approached me and asked if we could consider exploring a new site location for them. And so they've been, very happily ensconced in Trackside, and Trackside has been a wonderful partner for us, and I think, mutually beneficial. But in their request, they highlighted two concerns. One is they are anticipating that program growing, and so they did express a concern about just outgrowing that space. I think the more pertinent concern for them in their day-to-day lives was just the natural tension that comes with cohabitating a space. And so one of the challenges for our staff, and I have to imagine it's a challenge for Cindy as well, is our folks have to go in and set up every morning and break down every afternoon so they can leave the space for the Trackside folks, and the Trackside folks have to set up and break down as well. And that, I think, is, as they were describing, has really just become, especially as they've grown deeper into the program and more established with some of these projects they're running, that's just become, a significant challenge for them. And so, in listening to them, I thought, sure, of course we can go and just take a look around. And so we did. So we engaged a commercial real estate agent here in the region. We looked at a number of sites at the very beginning part of the summer, downtown, in the area of Wilton Library. And then in August, we looked at a couple of sites across the street here. We looked at the Fidelco building, which is behind Cannon Grange, and then we also looked at the ABC house, the former boys ABC house. And the team thought that site, 15 Cannon Road, would be, of all of the different sites we saw, the most appropriate. And so we're in the process of pursuing that now. And so there are a number of steps that we have to take. And I wrote to you, just the questions that I had that we needed to answer as we kind of move through this process. And so the first was, we're in a multi-year lease with Trackside. And so how do we negotiate that? So I've had two conversations with the board president, Forrest Close, and the agreement that we have is that if at some point in time we're ready to vacate that and move to a new location, we'll give them 4 months' notice. And I'm comfortable with that. Forrest is comfortable with that. He has spoken to Cindy Moser, who's the executive director over there. And, again, it's a community agency. I think we have a good partnership with them. And, we want to make sure that they have enough time so as we are withdrawing, they can, backfill with rental opportunities. And so we'll now, kind of reduce that agreement to writing, but I don't yet have a, kind of a date zero where we begin that 4-month clock, because we're still working on the other side. So that was one concern. The next is just going through the process to make sure that the facility across the street here is actually, going to be suitable for us. And so next week, Chris Burney is bringing in ATC. They do, physical plant inspections for us. They, test for lead, test for asbestos. So they're going to do some inspections across the way. I've reached out to an architect in town to assist with the application. So it's the same architect that prepared the application for Cahal Academy. You may recall the story that Heather published in Good Morning Wilton. There was a private school from out of town that was looking to occupy that space. that architect, put together a really solid application, so I called him and just asked him if he'd be willing to assist us. And so we actually spoke today, and he is. So we'll get the application process underway. And so working with town, working with Chris Burney, Mike Wren, et cetera, we'll get that process moving. Go ahead.
Did they get zoning approval?
Well, that was the process they were going through, and they terminated the.
Okay.
They terminated the pursuit before they actually got to that point. So I think the application was prepared.
Okay.
They were setting up for a public hearing, and what I'm told is that this came from Chris, but they were very pleased with the quality of that application. So
we should just duplicate that, replicate that, and hopefully.
yeah, to the extent that's appropriate. And so I think we'll be in very good hands while we're pursuing that. I think some of the other pieces that are still, coming together. The proposed monthly rent in the lease for 15 Cannon is actually less than what we're currently paying. But I'm not necessarily anticipating that we'll have a savings offset because, we'll also have to make sure we're covering some custodial costs as well as some of the utilities costs, or all of the utilities costs. So we have to get estimates and have a full cost, a total cost estimate of what it's going to be to occupy that, which I'll share with you once that exploration is complete. We thought initially that we might have to put in a wheelchair ramp in the front of the building to make it ADA accessible, but the architect told me today there actually already is one, so there's a savings that we won't have to incur. As part of this proposal coming together, we're also interested in having a permanent location for our community steps program, and so this building has ample square footage to accommodate community steps as well as Genesis. The upside, from the instructional standpoint is, they'll have, in addition to having their own space, they'll have it 12 months of the year, so they won't have to vacate in the summer to accommodate the trackside programs that run over there. If they wanted to run evening programs again, we have the space. So, if we want to do that, we could. There is a garden in the back that they're attracted to, and there's, ample outdoor space so they can take advantage of that. So I see, right now, a lot of upside if we can get it together. I don't have a firm date where we'd be ready to move in, but I'm thinking, sometime maybe midwinter-ish. And so that's a
Second semester.
very rough estimate. I think so, yeah. So, in the early part of the second semester, perhaps. One of the other questions, I was in touch with Lynn Vanderslice about this and just updating her on kind of where we were and what we were thinking. And so one of the questions that she was going to pursue and come back to me, and I have to connect with her still, is, officially who's got the authority to sign a lease agreement? Is that a Board of Ed or is that a Board of Selectmen? She was thinking probably Board of Selectmen, but we'll resolve that. And again, we'll go through the process here.
Yeah, I put this forward a year and a half ago when they announced they were leaving.
So, dear President,
It's ideal. It's a perfect spot.
There's a lot of upsides. So.
Yeah.
there is. Yeah, the proximity to the high school
Yeah.
was another really attractive.
But nothing but positives for Genesis.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
nothing.
yeah.
It was a shame to see the ABC go on the boys' side, but, yeah.
Well, the 12-month access and the not
Yeah.
switching gears and the community steps possibilities. So obviously it'll come down to looking at costs and
Right.
long-term as well, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'll just provide, I imagine we'll pick up some momentum here in the coming weeks with the process as we get going with a permit application and all of these other, pieces come together. We're, using Shipman and Goodman to serve as our attorneys here, as we're working through the lease details. So stand by.
Okay. Any questions? All right, well, thank you for that. We'll look forward to the next update. Okay, where are we? Wilton Warrior.
Right, and so just to close the loop on this, very, very briefly, as you know, the high school, we talked about this earlier at a previous board meeting, changed the mascot to a Greek or Trojan warrior back in 1983. The full process of distancing ourselves from Native American imagery was never completed. So when I spoke with all of you back in June at our last board meeting, I presented this, that we were pursuing this logo change. We worked with some over the summer, and then a local graphic artist emerged more recently and presented some really wonderful modifications that we have now adopted. So we have a revised logo, we have a standard font color, we have standard font. All that was presented to you. Really, the last piece that we were working on was just the athletics logo, and so that's been finalized as well. And so, working with the graphic artist, he had done some research and really, changed the spear to be reflective of a traditional Roman spear. And so we've been sharing these logos with groups and organizations in town who want to reproduce them. We're reproducing them and now using them, on our own apparel and helmets, and I think we have the process completed.
Questions, comments? Is there anything you need the board to do?
At this point, I don't. We had talked in a previous meeting about the board voting to adopt, and so if there was interest in doing that, what I could do is just, take the information in this presentation, turn it into an action item, and, you could vote
Or
to
can we
adopt
do
all
it
of
now?
these things.
Rather than, there's no.
Well, we should wait, just
Okay.
because it wasn't on the agenda.
Okay.
It's an action item.
All right.
And unless there's an emergency.
There's no emergency here.
Okay, all right. So you've gotten all the feedback that you need.
I do.
Okay. Any questions or comments? All right, well, thank you to the graphic artist who's so.
It will be a challenge to get all the other community members who use that logo for a variety of ways to adopt and be consistent.
So interestingly, that was one of our goals, was to really be consistent. And so Dave was telling me, we were talking a week or so ago, and he said he's a fair number of people from youth organizations have reached out to him and requested this, and he just wanted my okay. I said, of course.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking originally the same, because there's so many different versions, but actually, this has, it's got enough sunlight and people are seeing it.
Good.
So I don't think it's going to be as heavy a lift as,
Yeah.
at least as I was originally
Well,
anticipating.
Good Morning Wilton did a nice story on it, so that's good.
Yeah,
The word is out.
And there'll be some transition, and I think everyone understands
Yeah.
that, right? Yeah.
Can our athletic departments send it to athletics and the PTAs can send it out?
And I think, they probably have, so I don't want to, I know the PTAs were in touch early, and in fact, they were looking this summer, and, even before we had, this version from Dave. And so I just think, Debbie's right, we'll probably be in a bit of transition, but we'll certainly be, proactive. It was my intention to put the graphics on the website so people could just, pull them down,
Right.
and just make them really easily accessible.
Yeah.
The hand-me-down Knobs T-shirt, is gonna have the old.
Well, the old logo, they're everywhere, literally everywhere. I've said for years, Wilton is the best branded town I have ever encountered, and I stand by that.
Yeah.
These logos are
No doubt about it.
everywhere, on every T-shirt and every billboard and every wall.
Which is a happy thing.
Yes, it's great. It's really, it's great.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Action items. Do I
I'm just kidding, I'm
dare
just
say it?
Yes.
No.
I move that we,
No, wait. All right, so this is to discuss and approve our Board of Ed goals. So just as a preface, there were a couple of suggestions made last week. They're in red. And then there was one thing that I omitted, which also is in red in the last one. And, okay, I'm done.
I move that we accept the Board of Education goals as presented, this version.
Okay, version 4.
Version 4. Okay.
I second.
Thanks, Laura. All in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
4
done.
times as
No
strong.
more. Okay.
No, thanks for everybody's input. Okay, there's a preview of coming attractions. The Hall of Fame, in order to do it correctly and comprehensively and thoughtfully, it was too rushed for October 7th. So that will turn into a regular board meeting on October 7th. And Hall of Fame will be a TBD in terms of a date.
Yeah, we're
right?
thinking the ceremony in the springtime,
Okay.
and that'll get us actually
Okay.
back on our schedule.
Yeah, we get it, pick a date now that would
Yes.
help in scheduling people and stuff like that. The earlier we can pick the date certain.
Yeah,
Good
we'll Lucy and I will do that in the next week and send it out to people. So
Okay.
in figure May.
All right. And then we have a pretty regular meeting schedule then
Yeah.
for October and
7th and 14th.
November. Yeah. All right. Are there further comments from the public? I don't see anybody here. Lucille?
No, there are not.
All right, then our agenda is finished. Are there any burning items that need to be discussed? All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to all you Zoomers, and good night.